Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the FV4201 Chieftain Prototype. Unfortunately, I recorded this entire video and my mic was not plugged in, so try to. So this tank is available by the gold ticket draw. As you can see here, when you enter the game you'll have this big pop-up for getting a free golden ticket, and I will talk about that in a moment. So firstly, let's go into the game and have a look at the draw. So how you get this tank is from the center of this draw with a very low drop chance. So you aren't getting this tank. It is almost impossible, because guess what? Golden tickets can only be bought for money. So the way to look at this is, you got a free ticket, there's some free gold, you know, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? It's not for you to get the tank, and you'd be crazy if you spent money to try and get this tank. It's not worth it. It costs, as far as I know, $1,500 or something to finish this entire draw for the 1 million gold. It's completely not worth it for the tank. Look at the gold draw as, you know, a little bit of free gold with one ticket, or tickets you got from previous events, and that's it basically. You aren't getting the tank, there's no chance. Essentially, this tank drops in a crate which has the very low drop chance, with the tank itself 200,000 gold and the gold vein legendary camouflage. So what is the FV4201 Chieftain Proto? Well, it's the third Chieftain in the game now, after the Chieftain T95 in Tier 8 and the Mark 6 in Tier 10. And essentially, a very quick summary of this tank and what it actually is. It's the Tier 10 Chieftain Mark 6 from back when it had APCR premium ammo, down in Tier 9 with essentially the same stats, but adjusted to be balanced in Tier 9. So it's got a lot of the identical stats as the old Mark 6, and you'll be able to see it in the stats. For example, acceleration rate, exactly the same as the old Mark 6. Penetration, exactly the same as the old Mark 6. The dispersion, exactly the same. A lot of the stats on this tank are exactly the same as the old Mark 6, with just a few of them being adjusted down to be balanced for Tier 9. Even the armor is almost the exact same. But yeah, essentially, the old Mark 6 down in Tier 9. Very quickly, I'll look at the stats. So there will be a review on my website later. It's not up there right now because, of course, Wargaming jumped this tank on us once again with no warning. So at least it was on the press accounts though, so I can review it. But the review, not on my site right now, it will be up later. I will add it to the description of the video later, and it will be notified through Discord and the site homepage. But let's look at the armor. Against 246mm of AP, which is fairly normal for a Tier 9 heavy tank, you can see that the tank has pretty good armor. The upper plate, completely impenetrable, 383mm effective armor. The turret front, completely impenetrable, up to 400mm thick on the front of the turret. The main weak points you want to notice on this tank are the lower plate, of course, only 130, not 150, it's 130mm thick, which is very easy for any tank to hesh from Tier 8 to 10. The hull corners, they are quite weak, down at 265, but not a reliable area to go for since they are small. The hull is often moving and it's right next to red bouncy areas. The cupola, of course. The crown weighs heavy on the king's head. 90mm thick, very bad, just like the Tier 10 Chieftain. And then finally, two small areas right next to the gun, which are around 230 to 250mm thick, but most of the time enemies won't be able to go through there. Now, turning the hull, you can see it's got horrible side armor, just like the Tier 10 Chieftain. 38mm where the tracks are, with some small amounts of spaced armor which only block HESH and HE, and then a small auto ricochet area at the back of the hull. But you do not want to be angling in this tank because 3 caliber bypass rule absolutely destroys its side armor, just like the Tier 10 Chieftain Mark 6. You can see, switching to premium ammo, nothing changes about the hull, really. The turret front does become a bit weaker under the gun and around the base of the turret, but it's not really a big weak point or too huge of an issue, just because often the tank is moving. That's going to be fairly hard to hit. The cupola, of course, is still weak. And then against when the hull is turned, you can see that auto ricochet bit at the back of the hull does become easily penetrable to heat. But otherwise, still a fairly resilient, solid armor profile. One thing to note about this tank is its upper plate is an auto ricochet, so all AP and APCR ammo will bounce off, no matter how high its penetration is, even the 410mm of AP from a Hori Mark Type 3. You can see here, it will always bounce off. But then of course, if the tank is sort of in a face hug or a bit closer to you, looking down, the upper plate will be easily penetrable to high penetration, armor piercing and APCR shells. Next, when using gun depression, the tank has a very solid turret, just like the Tier 10 Mark 6. Cupola almost hidden, but there's still a small area there where you can hit. The front of the turret, the only weak point is that area under the gun, which of course, with how it is angled, it becomes weaker when you use gun depression. So it reduces down from 270 to 290 when it is on flat ground, down to 250 to 260 when using gun depression. But still, remember, a small weak point, you can pull back in cover to hide it, and you can try and keep the tank moving a little bit to make it a bit harder for enemies to hit. Of course, enemies do also have to try avoid hitting the gun itself, as that will often block a shot. And of course, when moving the turret, it's going to be a bit harder to hit, just like you can see there. But overall, the armor of this tank, weak on the hull, very strong turret, is basically what you need to know. Upper plate is good, but you can't really rely too much on the hull armor just because lower plate is still very big. So, moving to the gun. This tank mounts a 120mm gun. Its ammo types are APCR, APCR HESH, well, more specifically APDS, APDS HESH, because this tank has amazing shell velocities of 1372 on standard, 1350 on premium, and then of course it's HESH ammo with very low 671. But a very nice ammo selection for this tank, which is very useful to have in battle, of course. Penetration is good on standard, 260, decent on premium, 310, fairly normal for a tier 9 heavy tank, and very good on the HESH at 110mm. Damage, again, very normal for a tier 9 heavy, 400 and 340 on standard and premium respectively. HESH, again, very nice damage, 515, and with the great reload and DPM that this tank has, that HESH does just really help boost up the damage. And of course, 2700 almost for a tier 9 heavy tank is very nice DPM. So the aim time of this tank, not the best, but also not terrible, at 3.7/3.9, depending on your equipment. Base aim time is where it sort of falls down a bit, 2.5, quite mediocre, especially for 400 alpha, but it's not the worst thing in the world, and it's not really that terrible. You do also have other tanks like the Lorraine 50T, which have also fairly slow aim time with lower alpha and worse gun handling than this. And the reason this isn't the biggest issue is because this tank has amazing dispersion values to make up for it. 0.308 with vertical stabilizer, or 0.262 with refined gun, which are very good for a tier 9 heavy tank. On top of this, it's got great gun handling, 0.17, 0.17, 0.1, or you can improve it with vertical stabilizer. Again, great shell velocities except on the HE, so you can't really be using that HESH at longer ranges. It does really have to be mid to close ranges or against very large targets, such as the turrets of the FV4201. Just like the other Chieftains, this tank has amazing gun depression of 10 degrees, which makes it very comfortable on a ridgeline. Very easy to use, especially as this tank isn't super tall, but you do have to be careful of the rear again. Just like the other Chieftains, 0 degrees, so when running away from tanks, you absolutely cannot hit them most of the time. But overall, the gun, very reliable, very nice armament to have. Great DPM, very good shell velocities, with incredible snapshot capability due to the amazing dispersion and the velocity, of course. Very nice HESH shells, of course, for close range where you can rack up the damage on tank sides and rears. And there aren't really any bad aspects to this gun. The only areas which are not super impressive are the aim time, which is still really compensated by the other stats of the accuracy, and of course the penetration, which is just fairly average for a tier 9 heavy, but overall a great gun. Next, the mobility, top speed 42, very nice. Acceleration rate is 15.3, which is good for a tier 9 heavy. Reverse speed is very normal at 15, the same 56 ton weight as the tier 10 Chieftain with the same base horsepower. Next, looking at the terrain resistances, you can see it has 1 on hard terrain, which is good, but compared to the medium terrain of 1.3, does mean you will notice quite a bit of difference when you are driving on roads or off-roads. Of course, that's the difference between hard and medium. So you do have to be more wary compared to the Chieftain Mark 6, which has a less of a difference in terrain resistance. If you are on hard terrain, your mobility is much better than medium terrain, but still overall very good mobility. 15.3 horsepower per ton on hard, 11.8 on medium, and traverse 36.7 on hard and 28 on medium. Still overall pretty good mobility. So next, enough of the stats, let's look at equipment. Personally, for me, I'm going with gun rammer because I want to utilize that tank's great DPM, so reducing its reload down to 9 seconds. Of course, calibrated shells do work because this tank features hull down gameplay where increased penetration is good, and a lot of the time you don't have massive pressure on reloading, and you will see that later in the battles. This tank, of course, also has HESH, but 9mm increase isn't the most massive, and it doesn't make a big difference against lower plates of tanks at this tier. So I'm still going with gun rammer. Next, I'm using improved control just because while this tank does have good mobility, I still feel the tank's traverse speed is fairly lacking, and you will also notice that compared to the tier 10 Chieftain. If you remember, the old Mark 6 used to have better traverse speed, but then they nerfed it. This sort of feels like that nerfed traverse, so I am using improved control just to make it a bit better. And this tank already has great acceleration rate on both terrain types. Next, I'm using improved assembly because this tank mainly relies on its armor angling rather than the actual thickness of the tank. Using enhanced armor will only really affect the area under your gun, and of course if you use gun depression then it becomes weak anyway, so not too much use with enhanced armor. That's why I'm using improved assembly. So next, enhanced gun lane drive because this tank, aim time not the best, but improving it with this does help quite a lot. Also, it has great shell velocities, remember, so supercharger isn't necessarily the most useful. However, if you do really want to min-max on the shell velocity and the snapshot capability of this tank, you might set it up like this. Of course, it also would help with using HESH at long distance, because having faster shell velocity on that would really help. But for me, I'm going with aim time. Next, same thing for vertical stabilizer or refined gun. Two ways to do it. You can choose to have slightly better effective aim time with the stabilizer, or just min-max on that great accuracy with refined gun, which would really help you to snap in shots at long range. But for me personally, I'm going with stabilizer. Next, toolbox for faster repair and consumable delivery system, as this tank doesn't have any special consumables, it's just the normal setup. Same for provisions. So quickly, I'll show you the gold vein camo of this tank, as it is new and unique to this vehicle. It is 3D, it is animated, and it does have these lights at the front. There's no special kill animations for when you do kill someone in the battle or for other activities happening in the battle, but you can see the gold sort of flowing on the side of the tank, and then the rear lighting up occasionally, which also shows up in battle. But yeah, I think Wargaming has done a wonderful job on this camo. It does look very good, but unfortunately I'll definitely not be getting this one myself due to how the tank has to be obtained. But yeah, a very nice looking camo, at least in my opinion. So I do have 3 replays to show. The first one is from a friend who has played the Chieftain Prototype, and this one sort of shows some very nice stats on the tank, notably the great snapshot capability due to its very good shell velocities, its great dispersion, and of course it also shows the horrible side and rear armour that the Chieftain Proto has, which I forgot to mention, but it is the same as the Mark VI. Very weak on the hull sides and hull rear, same on the turret. But here you'll notice this tank's great top speed, good mobility, allowing it to get into position quickly. It's definitely one of the faster tier 9 heavy tanks in terms of its acceleration and top speed combined. And you can see here, immediately, snapshot right into the cupola of the M4 Yo, without even aiming at all. Of course, because this is my friend's replay, I'm not exactly sure what equipment he's running, but having watched it already, I'm pretty sure it's refined gun, because he does snap in shots very easily with no aiming at all, and it is pretty impressive, and hopefully it will help you to decide what equipment you want to run. So you can see here, none of these shots have really been aimed in too much. That one was full on the move at 28 kilometers per hour, snapping right into the Yo. So it does have great snapshot capabilities as showcased by this replay. You can also see its great DPM coming into use. It's been sort of quite quick battle right now, but already up to 2000 damage. And you'll see compared to the other replays, this one's by far the quickest with the most damage. So you can see my friend there tried to go for a Hesh on the AMX Prototype, but a good move not doing that because the Prototype does have spaced sides, so it is a bit of a risky thing to do. You can see he's going to push down into the dip and try and go hull down against the WZ-120, but remember this tank's lower plate isn't the smallest, so he does poke over here, and with the fast aim time on that tank, the WZ just snaps a shot into the lower plate. But again, he's been firing almost non-stop this whole battle, and another nice snapshot there, barely aiming on that Vipera. But yeah, firing almost non-stop for this battle. You can see the tank's nice DPM racking up some damage for the result. But here you'll notice his hull rear is showing towards where the enemy team is, and now he is trying to turn a bit and takes a huge 900 damage shot into the rear of the tank, which is a big issue for the Chieftain. You'll see that the shot penetrates right there and does massive damage, and it's not just high caliber guns like the Waffenträger which will be doing that. Anything can penetrate your rear with HE. Most tanks can penetrate your sides with HE, so you do really want to be careful about that. It's just like the tier 10 Chieftain Mark VI. But you can see there, pretty fast replay, already doing almost 4000 damage, so quite an impressive result for such short a replay. You can see 3892 damage, almost 1600 spotting, first class mastery. This one I believe was without any premium account or credit booster. Actually it might have had premium account because all press accounts come with some premium account, as you can see there, but still making a decent amount of credits. Now this next battle is a fair bit slower, but it does still show the tank in a more sort of all-round situation. So it is on Ghost Factory. I'm going to be going towards base A, and this one is my replay, so I can tell you what I am running on it. I have improved control, so my acceleration not quite as good as it could be, on this tank if I did use the engine accelerator. But you can see here I'm still easily accelerating to a good speed and getting into position fairly quickly for a heavy tank. I also have vertical stabilizer, so definitely not going to be making as impressive snapshots as the previous battle, but I'm not really the type of player who generally takes risky snapshots, so for me I do run the vertical stabilizer. You can see here 3 tanks on my team haven't moved yet, so I'm a bit isolated on this flank with only 2 other allies with me. Notice there how I can shoot the STB, it's going to be a bit important later in the battle. Luckily that Jagdtiger not going for me because my weak hull armor would not be doing me any good there. And you can see the tank's nice DPM does allow me to put in a second shot into that Jagdtiger with a 7.7 second reload on adrenaline. You will also notice a bit laggy. I do have quite high packet loss while I'm playing this battle and a fair amount of ping, so it does sort of show in the replay, which is unfortunate, but oh well. Here you can see I have retreated because almost the entire enemy team is on this flank, and as a chieftain you do not want to be the frontline tank as your hull armor is weak and you can't really hold your own against multiple enemies. So here I have fallen back to a second line position, being a bit more careful. However, you'll also notice I'm not doing much in this second line position and the enemies also aren't pushing. Our AMX-50B off to the side providing a nice distraction, so I'm like, I'll push up, I can be hull down here against these tanks, so I'll just try and whittle down the enemy's hit points. So I've made that Rinoceronte a one-shot now, causing him to back off, but now the STB-1 off to the side is causing me some issues. If I push up, he can shoot me, but if I don't deal with him, then it's going to be a bit of a problem dealing with this position. Luckily though, our Jag Panzer E100 does deal with him, so there's no problem pushing here now. And here you can see, nice use of the Hesh. Against the 65mm side plate of the Yo, it very easily goes in, and it's something you do want to use in this tank. The second shot there I didn't go for Hesh just because I wanted to confirm the damage, and it was looking like I would hit his back. So here you can see the nice reload and DPM of this tank does come in quite useful for a situation like that where I'm not really the main one taking the hits, as that Hori did rush in to sort of absorb the attention of the enemies, but my nice DPM was still able to put out a good few shots. I could have gone for the Yo instead of the Rinoceronte, but I did just want to clear the guns from the game instead of getting the damage. But here you'll see the mobility of the tank coming in now at the end of the battle as we have to clear up the enemies. Now I know where all the enemies are, with the Leopard over at base C and the FV183 unable to hit me. So I'm just going to use the hit points, go in, tank a shot from the Jagdtiger to clear him. So with the Leopard on the side now, you can see I use Hesh, which is very nice. You do need to use this in battle as it does increase your damage. But unfortunately he does go down before I can get another shot of damage. And the same thing happens with the 183. So unfortunately 3,225 is where I'll end this battle. That battle, more of a normal one, not anything super special, not a very high score or anything, but you can still see the tank working, really. 3,200 damage, 1,060 blocked, first class mastery, as no one has this tank yet. 106,000 credits for that game. The next battle is on mines. This one's going to be less of an all-round game, and it shows more the hull down aspect of this tank, which is what you should be doing in a Chieftain. And of course, just like the old Chieftain Mark 6, this tank is very good at being hull down. Strong turret, great gun depression, great accuracy, great DPM, and good enough penetration for dealing with enemies. Important difference here is that this tank has APCR compared to the current Chieftain, which has Hesh. Of course, the APCR being better at dealing with heavy armor. So here I'm a bit overconfident. I go over the ridge, my shot misses, which is, I'm not sure what happened there, might have been just my bad aim, but my lower plate does poke over the ridge, allowing the E6 to shoot it. Unfortunately, that shot somehow doesn't penetrate, but oh well. E6 does try to HE me and does no damage. Hori does just penetrate me very easily. The 907 as well, one of them shooting the side of the hull and the other one shooting the cupola area. It does show on the viewport, not the cupola, but it counts as a cupola hit, I believe. So here I've lost 900 hit points already. I'll say definitely not the best play on my part, but I was still playing this tank for the first few battles, and I will say the Chieftain has never really been my type of tank. I've never really had the best time in it, and definitely not my cup of tea personally, but it is still a great tank, and it is still excelling in hull down play. But you can see here, unfortunately, that E75 does snap a shot in very easily, barely aiming, and I do get another shot into him as well. But here is where the damage starts to rack up, I say, as I bounce. But I am hull down now, so enemies can't really do too much to me unless they snap like a polar. And it is going to be pretty hard to deal with a Chieftain in this position. You can see I am now loading APCR after that first bounce on the turret cheek of the E75. But unfortunately a bad shot by me there. E75 does expose his entire tank, which is unfortunately what the E75 has to do to dig me out of this position. He cannot get me out of this position, he cannot damage me unless he hits my cupola, or he exposes his entire tank to push over the ridge and shoot my lower plate, because I can just control the ridge with this tank's great gun depression, its great turret armor, and its good DPM, and you will see it coming into effect a bit later. So, E75 damaging my gun there, but luckily no damage to my tank. And the gun damage, you will notice, you have to be a bit careful of that, because it means enemies are aiming for that weak point under your gun, which is, of course, weaker than the rest of your turret. But luckily, as I'm not using my full gun depression, it's still strong enough to bounce that E75. And then another shot into the front of the turret of the E75. But here you'll see what I mean about the DPM. When you are playing hull down, you don't need the highest amount of DPM. That was just bad by me. I shouldn't have zoomed out really, I should have kept aiming in. But you don't need the highest DPM when you are sitting hull down, as you can just wait for the enemies, as they aren't really going to be putting a huge amount of pressure on you when you can sort of just pull back and reload. So a nice shot into the Minotauro. You can see that tank's great dispersion there, and here's what I mean about the E75. To dig me out of the position, he's having to push me, fully expose his tank and his entire lower plate to be able to hit me. And my great DPM allows me to kill him very easily before he can even shoot a second shot. Luckily there, the Minotauro does miss. Otherwise I would have gone down right there. But he does miss, so I'm still alive, allowing me to put in one more shot into the Minotauro. And you can see there the aim time of this tank, not the best, so hey, maybe you want to ignore the aiming and use vertical stabilizer and just snap in shots the whole time. But that game, 4000 damage, almost 2000 blocked, getting an ace, so I do earn quite a bit more credits. But yeah, I hope those 3 replays were helpful. First one showing the tank's characteristics really. Great accuracy, great shell velocity, good mobility, good DPM, all happening in a fairly fast replay, but also showing the terrible side and rear armor of this tank. Second replay, more of a normal battle, showing sort of all-round use, and then the final one, sort of slower paced hull down gameplay, which is where the Chieftain usually would be working very well. Of course, with the tank's great turret armor and all that. But yeah, the Chieftain Prototype, Not worth it in the current golden ticket draw, definitely not. This draw isn't for you to really be trying to go for the tank, it's just for gold really, and it's definitely not worth the price. This tank, in terms of where it is in tier 9, it's a fairly ordinary tank. It is a great tank, but it's nothing OP, it's nothing super amazing, it's not unheard of in terms of its gameplay, as there are other tier 9 tanks which are very good at hold down, have decent DPM at least, and decent mobility. But yeah, Chieftain Prototype, good tank, impossible to get, definitely not worth going for, definitely save your money and don't even attempt to try and get this tank. View the draw as free gold and that's it. But yeah, that is it for the Chieftain Prototype. Thanks for watching.